Hello and welcome to another Construct 3 tutorial where I will show you how to create a procedurally generated endless runner. So let me just show you the end result. Here we go. It takes a little while to start. I'm not pressing any buttons on the keyboard right now, so it's actually just running forward automatically, and I'm clicking the mouse to jump. There's also a double jump introduced into the game, but as you can see here, while I'm playing the game, every time I restart, the game looks a bit different. That's because everything you see is procedurally generated. Of course, it's up to you to make it more exciting than what you're seeing here. Let's see how this is done. Alright, so this is the main layout of the game. There's a lot going on, so I will show you piece by piece. First of all, these are the things in the main layout. The general idea of the game is that there are placeholders being dragged from right to left, and placeholders are the blue squares. Let's see here. So placeholders get generated automatically and are pulled along using a puller object, and these are the orange squares, these ones here. Orange squares have a row, you see here. This is for row 0, row 1, row 2, etc. The rows, they are pulled along. Placeholders also have a row, so they are attached to the puller of the same row. Placeholders have the pin behavior, so they are pinned to the puller. As the puller moves along, so does the placeholders. And the puller object has the bullet behavior, so it's just pulling the placeholders to the left. As the game goes on, new placeholders are automatically generated, and this is done using spawners. These are the pink squares here to the right. You don't have any special behavior. There's only there to make easily mark the X and Y coordinates of the new placeholders. So let's see here. We have the bullet behavior on the pullers. No acceleration, just the same speed all of the time. We're not bouncing off of solids. So for the rest, it's pretty much standard. They only have a row, spawners only have the row, and the placeholders have a row, an index, and handled. As the placeholders are dragged to the left, there is a vertical bar called a destroyer. Let me see here more to the left. This is the destroyer. Whenever a placeholder hits the destroyer, it is destroyed. That's in order not to cause any memory leaks. The generation of placeholder occurs when a placeholder overlaps the generator object, and that's the yellow object here at the bottom. When that happens, a new set of placeholders will be spawned on the spawners. Because there are always new placeholders passing the generator, the new placeholders will be spawned all of the time. And then there's the player, excuse me. That's very simple. Player has a simple sprite animation, very simple sprite animation, and it has the platform behavior, so it can walk around and jump. The default controls have been disabled. You can see that here because you can see it in the code. The controls are simulated. You are two ways. There are two ways for the player. You can die and hence cause a game over situation, either by hitting a spike or by hitting the black object called the player killer. And the black object is here at the left side, just beside the layout. So that only happens if the player lags too far behind and it's about to go off screen. The bulk of the game is actually the random generation of platforms, jewels, and spikes. In order to get this kind of behavior, several platform sprites were introduced. In essence, a combination of those sprites is grouped into a template, and all of those sprites are bundled in a template's parts family, which can be the solid behavior as well as the pin behavior to be able to pin it to a placeholder. So let me see here. All of these parts are template parts. They are in the templates part B templates family rather, and they have a part, it's a variable, a row, a template, and an index. So for example here, this part is called a platform, this part called regular, this part is called obstacle, this is also regular, this is a platform because it's more into in height, higher in height. You have to see it that every combination of a vertical column is one template. So this is template 14, you can see it, and this is also part of template 14. So this is on to be placed on row 0 of template 14. This is to be placed on row 3 from template 14. So whenever the game decides that it's generating such a template, template 14, he will place this block at row 0, this block at row 3. So the same happens for every template that's displayed here above. All of these are separate templates. But of course, how does the game know that this template should follow that template? Otherwise it would be not so pretty. Here you can see, for example, there's a little bump. If only this template were spawned and after that template was spawned, it wouldn't be very pretty. So it's actually this one followed by, so this one followed by this one followed by this one. The combination of those templates from left to right is called a sequence, and sequences are stored in a sequence array, and we'll see in a minute in the code how that works. So actually what you're seeing here on the top of the layout, those are all sequences. At the bottom you can see some parts I introduced here as well. These are not part of sequences or templates, I just introduced them here so you can use them in your game or to create some more variation on what you've seen already. A template holds the 4 instance variables. Let's see here, I click there. The part instance variable holds a type, so the game can discern which type of block it is. The row instance variable specifies on which row the block should be spawned, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. The template instance variable groups parts that belong together into a single template, so vertically. And lastly, the index variable is used to keep track of the past, of the horizontal index, or the column if you will, or the part as the parts is being generated from right to left. So there are 3 types of jewels in the game the player can pick up. You can see them here, and they are also grouped into the jewels family, and the family has a pin behavior to be able to pin it to a placeholder. There are also spikes, which is grouped into the spikes family here. When a user comes in contact with it, the game is over. And then there is the springboard that allows the player to jump a bit forward when he is lagging behind. It is also the pin behavior to be able to pin it to a placeholder. There's a timer object, which is brown. That's only function is to manage the timers in the game. There's only one, and that's to use the springboard behavior. So there's the dialog, which is on its own layer, and a very minimal HUD showing the score, and also on its own layer. The other layers are pretty self-explanatory. I've added some extra sprites, so you can generate more randomness in the generation, and feel free to add your own, of course. So next, let's take a look at the code. So there is a single event sheet called game, and it's divided into some sections. This is the initialization section part of the game. Basically, it starts with hiding the game over dialog and initializing the score. There's a flag called game over, and it's set to denote that the game isn't over. It will be used to deactivate the controls, for example, whenever the game is over. The springboard variable is a variable that's used to see if the player has just hit a springboard and is supposed to jump a little bit further. And next we request the sequences JSON file using the Ajax plugin. So Let me show you the sequence JSON file. What you see here in the rows are different sequences. There are 11 sequences here, and a sequence consists out of up to 6 template parts in this case. So here we will be spawning template part 1, 1, and 1, and then 3 times nothing. Whenever there's a 0, nothing is spawned. So here in this sequence is template part 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so on and so on. So there are different sequences. You can make as many sequences if you want. So then we wait for the sequences file to load using the asynchronous functionality of construct. And then we also initialize a queue. We'll look into that a little bit further down the road. And then we generate some parts actually. So generation of the parts uses an index. There are already 15 template parts on the layout, so the next one to be generated should be number 16. Therefore, this is initialized to number 15. So these are 15. Normally it should be 15 here. So the next one is 16. That's why this is 15. We pick all the pullers. We set the angle in the correct direction, and we disable it. And then the bullet behavior is temporarily disabled to be able to link all of the existing template parts already on the layout at design time to their respective placeholders. So we pick them and we loop through each of them. And they're all at the bottom, so row 0. So pick the placeholders with the correct index and the bottom row. That's what we do here. We pin the placeholder part to the correct placeholder and mark it to be destroyed when the placeholder is destroyed. This is when it's hit by the destroy object actually. So we pick all of the placeholders that are already on the layout at design time, and we pin them to the puller in the same row. That's what we do here. For each placeholder we pick the correct puller and we pin it to the puller. So then we pick all of the placeholders that are already on the layout at design time, and we pin them to the puller at the same row. So that's what we do here. For each placeholder we pick the puller and then we pin it to the puller. So at start of the movement, by enabling the bullet behavior of the puller, and the game actually basically starts. That's the initialization part of the game. So the base functionality, we do something on every tick. That's setting the score, of course. And so this is the functionality at the basis of every movement. We're basically constantly simulating the player going to the right, except when the game is over. So the game is over is 0. Oh, we have to stop pressing to the right when the player is jumping or falling, because otherwise it would jump way too far and the game wouldn't be a challenge. So one exception is when the player hits a springboard. In that case, a flag is set, and what happens then is that the player has to keep on moving until the flag is reset by a timer object. So if it hits the springboard, we keep on going to the right. If it's not hitting a springboard, we only keep on going to the right when we're not jumping or falling. That's it, basically it. So the only control the player has is clicking the left mouse button. The player jumps. Note that by default the double jump functionality is activated. It shouldn't jump when the game is over though. So the game is over, no jump will appear. When the placeholder overlaps the generator, a new set of placeholders should be spawned. In order not to generate too many placeholders as it overlaps the generated, there's a handled instance variable. Only unhandled placeholders can cause a generation of new placeholders. So that's what we do here. If a placeholder is overlapping a generator and it's not being handled yet, we will generate a new column and place the placeholder to handle so it doesn't get evaluated again. When a placeholder overlaps the destroyer, however, it is destroyed, and all of the pinned things on the placeholder are also destroyed along with it. So when a player hits a jewel, the score is increased and the jewel is destroyed. Very easy. The game is over when the player moves off screen, thus hitting the player killer. It's overlapping the player killer. We show the dialogue saying game over. If it's overlapping spikes, the game is also over. Yeah. So, and when the player hits a springboard, the springboard animation plays. The player jumps, and the springboard flag is set to make the player jump further in the onTick event. It only does that for a short period of time, just until the timer fires. That's what we do here. We set the animation frame, we jump, we set the flag, so we jump a little bit further, but we don't do that for 0.2 seconds actually. So whenever the timer object fires, we set the springboard to 0. So then for the generation part. First, a little general word on how generation works. Placeholders get spawned on every row. And then there's decided if to pin a template part to that placeholder or not. Template parts are the sprites of the main layout. All parts have a template indicator. It's a number grouping different different parts together that should be spawned together in the same column. Each also holds a row to keep track of which row it should be spawned on. In order to have nice layouts, the generation cannot be totally random, of course. For example, if some platforms or hills are being spawned, the sequence of templates should be okay. In order to guarantee this, the game works with sequences. I just showed you the sequences JSON file. A sequence is just a set of templates that should be generated one after the other. In order to keep track of which sequences exist, there's the JSON file here, which I showed you a bit earlier. So each row in the sequences JSON file holds the sequence. It contains a number of columns, each holding a sequence number. In essence, the sequences are randomized, but the parts in the sequence always strictly in that order. So the function generate new column will first add 1 to the current index, and then the generating a column, we start with upping the index, and then we call the function pop next template to get the next template to spawn. So jewels, spikes, and springboard are not part of templates. They are spawned at random, but there can not be a jewel, a spike, or a springboard at the same place. That's why these flags take care of when there's a possibility to spawn either a jewel, a spike, or a springboard. So we pick all of the spawners, and for each spawner we pick the corresponding puller using the row instance variable. That's what we do here. We make the placeholder on the correct spot by calculating the x position based on the current index and the y position of the spawner. That's what we do here. So the x position is relative to the x position of the puller plus the current index times the block width, and the spawner y coordinate is just the y coordinate. So we pin the placeholder to the puller, and we set the correct index, and we set the correct row. So next we pick the placeholder we just created, and we initialize some flags we will use later on. Next we pick the template that belongs to the row or the placeholder being spawned. This could very well be no part. In that case, the picking doesn't occur and the part placed flag is not set to 1 here. So we create the object by creating using the object type name on the layer parts. We set the flag. So it was created, we pick it, and we pin it to the placeholder, and make sure it's destroyed along with the placeholder by setting the pinned object to true here, destroyed with pinned object, and we up the index. See if we can spawn a jewel, a spike, or a springboard. So the next time the loop happens, it loops from bottom to top. So a jewel, a spike, or a springboard always comes on top of a solid template part, actually. So we check if the next loop is eligible for a jewel, for a spike, or for a springboard. So if a part was placed and a jewel could be placed, then we randomize if a jewel is placed, and we can spawn multiple jewels on top of each other. So the next loop is also eligible for a jewel, basically, but not for a spike or a springboard, of course. So that's what we do here. We randomize the jewel and we mark the jewel as placed. And we pin it to the placeholder and we make it destroyed along with the placeholder. If no jewel was placed, next time we want to be spawning one to avoid one being spawned in mid-air. So then what we're doing is the next eligible jewel is set to 0. So if no part was placed and it's okay to place a spike, then there's no jewel placed in the above piece code. So that what we do here, we decide to place a spike or not. So floor random 3, so 1 chance in 4 that we place a spike. and then we create the spike on the layer parts, and we set the flag, we pick the last created spike, and we pin it to the placeholder, the same thing again. And so if a part wasn't placed, we can place a springboard, and the jewel wasn't placed, and the spike wasn't placed. We also can have one springboard. We randomize the placing of the springboard, and then we get pinning to the placeholder, stopping the animation, and actually just initializing the springboard we've just set in there. So this is pretty elaborate, and taking into account some flags here, eligible for jewel, eligible for spikes, eligible for springboard, in order to get the generation of the procedural generation correct. So you can see here, you use the pop next template. Why do we use that? Pop next template is actually parts that are being generated in a queue, and this function will just pop the next part to be generated from that queue. So we spawn a regular block bottom whenever there is nothing in the queue. So that's what we saw here. If there's nothing in the queue, meaning this is a 0, then we will do nothing. We will just return value 1. Else we will return the value which is at the 0 index, and we will pop the front on the x-axis. So if there's only one part left, we will generate more parts. And to generate more parts, that's the function right here. So we repeat that just 10 times, and then we loop through the array. And when it's not 0, meaning that nothing should be generated, we push back all of the templates part in that sequence. So we do that just 10 times. And 10 times, and index is here set to a floor of random sequence height, being we just pick a random sequence, and it's just the y coordinate is here the sequence we should be using, which is actually the row here. That's how it works. So basically the dialog is just restart the layout whenever the user clicks restart, and we show the layout by showing the layer and activating the button. We stop the animation of the player, and then we set the game over flag. Stop the pullers and hide dialog, just set the dialog invisible and deactivate the logic. Basically that's it. So here I showed you how to create a basic procedurally generated endless runner. I hope you liked it. So as always, please like and subscribe. I will leave a link in the description of the video to the Sira store where you can get the full template. Thank you for watching.